Hey dudes and dudettes, and welcome to a radical episode of This Is PlayStation! Today we're gonna be looking at Namco's newest racer, Ridge Racer! This is gonna be so strap in for a wild ride! Ridge Racer was released in 1993 for Namco's System 22 arcade board. It boasted 3D polygon graphics and texture mapping, lending a huge sense of depth and realism to the game's world, and it became quite a hit. So it was obvious that a console port would be on the cards at some point. Lo and behold, we got one, and Ridge Racer landed on the Sony Playstation in 1995 as a launch title, being seen by many as a rival to Sega's Daytona USA. It's not hard to see why these comparisons were drawn. Both were arcade racing games with 3D texture map polygon graphics, but let me say right now that Ridge Racer and Daytona are very different games in almost every area. The PlayStation version was built almost entirely from scratch for the hardware, as porting directly from the Namco System 22 proved rather difficult. So did they do a good job? Let's find out. Right when you boot up Ridge Racer, you're greeted with an awesome loading screen. It's Galaga, one of Namco's arcade classics. But what really makes this cool is that it's fully playable. If that wasn't enough, managing to take out every single enemy on the screen before the game loads unlocks a bunch of cars in the main Ridge Racer game based on old Namco games such as Mappy right off the bat. So we jump into the menu and are greeted with that familiar shout. It's a nostalgic jingle for me, as I did grow up with this game, being one of the first I ever played. Once we're at the menu, we can choose our track, our car, and even our music, much like Outrun. There's of course the usual options menu and a menu showing record times. This particular menu is also how you save the game. Ridge Racer's track layout is odd. Technically there are only 2 tracks in the game, and the second track is basically an extended version of the first one. On the beginner and medium difficulties, you race the same track, except in medium, the cars are a bit faster. On the hard mode difficulty, you've got a slightly extended track, but still for the most part, the exact same thing. Time Trial is another mode that you can play, which is basically a 1v1 race on the hard course. Once you've beaten beginner, medium and hard, as well as Time Trial, you unlock extra courses which are the same thing, but in reverse. There is a hidden reverse course in the game, however. Accessing this one is particularly interesting, as I'll go through later. If I lost anyone, basically, there's only really one kind of track in the game, and a slightly extended version of that track. In terms of course design, it's a good course, but since technically every track in the game is the same, it lacks the variety seen in so many of its competitors, which is a bit of a shame. It's like if, say in Mario Kart 64, you could only play Luigi Raceway, and then Luigi Raceway slightly extended version. How about game mechanics? Ridge Racer provides you with a considerably large selection of cars, and they all handle differently, which is great to see. I stick with the RIIIIIIDGE myself, as its handling makes cutting corners much easier. Of course, there's also manual and automatic transmissions to choose from, and in terms of drifting mechanics, which the title would suggest play a key role, I find them slightly more accessible than those of other arcade racers. Simply let go of the accelerator, tap the brake, then slam back on the gas, at least in automatic, and yeah, you're drifting. If it sounds familiar, then you might be thinking of Outrun 2. That's something I picked up on myself. The mechanics feel like the precursor to the ones found in that game, although obviously Outrun's mechanics were far more polished. That aside, the game's got a great sense of speed, and on the whole it's incredibly fun to play. The graphical side of things is also superb, with bright, colourful environments and superb car details. The track that we do have is bursting with life, with the helicopter swooping in at the jump, the wonderfully lit tunnels, and even that cool little mural of Pac-Man made out of lights on the skyscraper. Considering this is a 32-bit game, it's damn impressive what Namco achieved aesthetically, and even more so considering this was a launch title for the PlayStation. Looking at the initial port of Daytona USA on the Sega Saturn, damn, Sony had every right to brag. As for the soundtrack, well, the game's music is probably one of my favourite things about it. Sample heavy, blood pumping, and perhaps a wee bit cheesy, Ridge Racer's soundtrack is gloriously 90s in its execution, and it's great fun to listen to. RIIIIIIIDGE Hero is my unrivaled favourite. Also worthy of note is that the victory theme samples Boing Boom Cha by Kraftwerk, something my brother picked up almost immediately upon hearing the song. Overall, the soundtrack's not to everyone's taste, and not every song is a winner. That aforementioned victory theme in particular is shite. But on the whole, I just love this game's music. One final note about the game is all of the cool secrets, Easter eggs and content that they packed into this thing. There's the aforementioned Gallagher loading screen secret, but there's so much more. Firstly, when you start the race, if you turn around instead of racing forward like normal, you'll see a wall. Drive into that wall and you're thrown onto a special reversed version of the track. It's the cleverest way I've seen of accessing a hidden track in a racing game. And it actually reminds me of later video games like Crash Nitro Kart on the Game Boy Advance, which had you travel out of bounds on one course to find a hidden character. Anyway, I digress. Next up is the Hidden Duel Race. Ridge Racer, surprisingly for a port of an arcade racer, has a final boss. Well, sort of. After beating the normal tracks and time trial, the time trial challenge becomes a three-way duel. The main opponent here is the Devil 13th racing car, a jet black car that moves at, fittingly enough, jet-like speeds. If you don't run a perfect race here, then you aren't beating him. The cocky bastard even waits at the finish line for you after the first lap. Beating this hell on wheels unlocks the true credit sequence as well as the car for you to use. But like hell I'm beating him. Anyway, there's one final secret. At the start of the game, all of the game data is loaded straight away, as opposed to most games that only load relevant data when it's needed. The only thing you need the game disc for after the initial title screen is the music. Which means you can take out the game disc and stick in, say, the Sonic CD soundtrack, and then listen to the likes of Stardust Speedway while playing Ridge Racer. Granted, compatibility isn't great, it'll cut the songs very awkwardly to match the initial songs that are supposed to be playing, but it works to some extent, and on the whole this means Ridge Racer did custom soundtracks over 10 years before the Xbox 360 and PS3 came about and made it more simple, and that's no mean feat. So overall, can I really recommend Ridge Racer? Absolutely. It remains one of my favourite titles in the PlayStation 1's library. There were many sequels and even a remake on the PS1 afterwards, but I'm really unfamiliar with which of those games are which, since Namco had apparently never heard of numbered sequels by that point. Alas, if you can grab it cheap, get Ridge Racer as soon as you can. Nowadays, it really shouldn't cost too much anyway, and I think it's also on the PlayStation Network for PlayStation 3 and Vita. Hey dudes, I hope you enjoyed this awesome episode of This Is PlayStation. What? What do you mean I'm supposed to be doing a show about the Sega Saturn? Oh shit!